So let's get started. Social intrapreneurship, it's of course a rather new word. It's about 10 years old, slightly more than 10 years old. So perhaps you haven't heard about it, perhaps you have heard about it somewhere. And as I was about to say, when I dropped out, I think Shizenkan is the only university in Japan, at least, that is teaching at the moment social intrapreneurship. A little bit about myself before we start. I was born in Denmark, but I have now been a resident of Japan for more than 30 years, actually. And I work on sustainability strategy and capacity building leadership with Japanese corporations. And I also work on next-gen leadership development for sustainability. And presently, I wear three hats. One is as professor at Shizenkan University, the MBA program. Second is as executive director of Next Leaders Initiative for Sustainability in Nellis, a global nonprofit empowering young leaders across the world. And I am also on the board of two listed companies in Japan as an independent board member. So I have a bit of different kind of perspectives on sustainability through these three roles. So to today's topic, but before we jump into social entrepreneurship, I want to ask you a little question. Here we have different kinds of beer. I don't know if you like beer or not, but it's not so essential to the discussion. But you might know that there's something called craft beer, which is supposed to be fundamentally different from mass-produced beer. And the quality in craft beer is that the taste of the brewer, the specificities of the terroir, the locality, the space, and so on are reflected in the taste. The beers are not manufactured. The beers are crafted. So that's what we call craft beer. And this notion is becoming very prominent in job or career design. There is a term which was coined in the United States, early 2000s, called job crafting. And basically it says that we should allow employees of organizations to craft their job to the largest possible extent. We should not push things down over their heads. We should give them freedom to choose, to design their own jobs within certain frames, of course, but the more you can arrive at job crafting, the higher will be the productivity and also the employee satisfaction. And this is important today because social intrapreneurship is one specific form of job crafting. It's not the only one. Job crafting is the broader term, but we will zoom in today on a very promising, very new form of job crafting called social intrapreneurship. Stay just for a second with this notion of job crafting. And I want to ask you a little question. I would like to invite you to open up your Zoom chat and tell me, at present, whatever work you do, whether you work for a large organization or you are on your own, to what extent would you say that you are able to job craft, to shape the work that you do according to your own tastes, desires, wishes? Give me a percentage from 100 to 0% in the Zoom chat, please. And let's see what you say. Oh, that's very nice. Jon, you have 80%, 50-50, okay. What else do we have? Shell, oh, Robin also 80 with an exclamation mark, that's nice. M's phone 70. 70 is a new percentage, which is very nice. I like that originality in that, thank you. And Eva has 80 as well. Thank you so much for your responses. And yeah, I mean, 100% can be difficult to achieve. Sometimes you have to follow someone's cues or work within some frames and so on. So I would say 80% is really good for your work life. And even anything above 50 is pretty acceptable. But when you get to 30 or 0%, then definitely starts feeling like a task and not a career or a calling anymore. So with this, we will jump into the topic for today. And we're going to talk about intrapreneuring or intrapreneurship as I said, a specific form of job crafting. And the funny thing is that intrapreneur, of course, is a new word. It was coined actually in 1978, as we should see in the second. But it's quite often funny how some terms, some words are coined by a person, and then there's some famous personality picking it up, and then it becomes famous. And this happened also with the word intrapreneuring or entrepreneurship, which Steve Jobs none other than Steve Jobs helped popularize in 1985 in an interview in Newsweek. And basically, as it says, it's referring to an employee of a company who uses entrepreneurial skills within existing organization to promote innovative product development and marketing or other corporate initiatives using that company's capital and resources. And I have a little video that I would like to share with you here. And I will now shift over, and I hope it all goes well.
What do the Post-it note, Gmail, and Sony PlayStation all have in common? Well, they were all invented by employees within large organizations. And this act of initiative and innovation is known as intrapreneurship. Whilst an entrepreneur starts up and runs their own company, an intrapreneur is responsible for innovating within an existing one. One of the pioneers of both the approach and the term was tech giant Apple. Back in 1985, the legendary Steve Jobs described the approach of the Macintosh team as intrapreneurship, a group of people going, in essence, back to the garage, but in a large company. This approach enabled Apple to build a revolutionary new product without being slowed down by day-to-day processes and a bunch of red tape. Apple isn't the only company to encourage intrapreneurship. In the early 2000s, Google famously introduced a concept called 20% time. This empowered employees to spend a fifth of their time away from their day-to-day job to be creative, innovative, and come up with new ideas. The likes of Gmail, Google News, and AdSense are all just some of the big successes that resulted from this approach. Intrapreneurship is important because it enables even the biggest companies to remain innovative and agile. It's also incredibly effective in making employees feel valued and motivated that they can really make a difference to the company's future. So, the next time that you're loading up your Mac, playing on a PlayStation, or writing on a humble Post-it note, remember, it would be nothing without intrapreneurship.
All right, thank you so much. It was just a little overview, and I should remind you, we are not yet at social entrepreneurship. We are still talking only about intrapreneurship as such, okay? And now, just to stay safe, I will try to go back to mine. So the three examples that the gentleman mentioned in this video, maybe the most famous example worldwide of intrapreneurship is the Post-it note created by 3M. It's such a famous business case that you may have heard about it, but for those who have not, I will tell it anyway. Actually, it started from a failure. A 3M scientist, Spencer Silver, he was trying to invent a new adhesive, a new kind of glue, but he made a failure and it was not very sticky. And then 3M has this rule of mingling different scientists and technologists in the company. They have this kind of sharing sessions where all the scientists or sort of product developers get together. And Spencer was kind of advertising his not so adhesive for a couple of years. And then one day he came across Art Frey. His co-worker, Art Frey, he was a churchgoer, and he wanted something to put in his hymn book so that he knows where to open the hymn book again. But if you put small pieces of paper, they kept dropping out. So he wanted something that stuck, but did not stick too much. So Art Frey, when he came across Spencer Silver's idea, he immediately thought, yes, this is something that can be used. So the two worked together. And in 1980, the Post-its were launched. Actually, they were first launched as Stick and Peel, they were called, and they were a complete marketing failure. And then they were relaunched as Post-its, and that's the reason we know about them and are telling the story here today. And this invention came out of 3M's 15% rule. It said 15% of your work time, which is basically 1 day a week, employees can do whatever they like. There are no rules for what they have to do, as long as they're working on something. This is a way that encourages initiative from bottom up and has been very instrumental in making 3M a creative company. So I think Gmail came out of this as well, but the 20% rule that they installed at Google was surely inspired by 3M. And many, as we saw already, good products from Google have come out of this 20% rule. In Japan, maybe the most famous example of intrapreneurship is the PlayStation. Ken Kutaragi was a bit of a maverick in Sony. He was tinkering, as it says here, with his daughters on a Nintendo PlayStation. And he thought, wait, maybe we can make it more powerful and user-friendly at Sony. And against the advice of his superiors, they didn't actually like the idea. He created one of the most recognizable brands globally today, the Sony PlayStation. These are just 3 examples of conventional intrapreneurship. So basically, intrapreneurship is entrepreneurship within an established organization. This is easily said, but as you may know, if you work in a large organization, it is quite often hard to practice. And that is why, of course, people have good ideas. They often drop out of the organization and set up their own companies. But it can be tough, you know. It's a completely different world, different level of risk-taking, different level of responsibility. Not all people want to be entrepreneurs. So it would be very helpful and useful. I think that was the idea behind intrapreneurship. If there is another setup, an opportunity for people within existing organizations to create something fundamentally new from the bottom up. So let me tell you the history of intrapreneurship, because it's kind of interesting. And then we will get, after that, to how social was attached to the idea of intrapreneurship. First of all, the idea of intrapreneuring or intrapreneurship. It was a term launched around 1978 by a gentleman called Gifford Pinchot III. He's still alive, still going strong. He got this idea that you could combine the word entrepreneur with intra, which means inside. So he wrote a book called Intrapreneuring, and the subtitle is Why You Don't Have to Leave the Corporation to Become an Entrepreneur. And that was the birth of the term intrapreneuring or intrapreneurship. But as I said already, probably the term was not too famous. He was not a famous guy, but some people picked it up. And one of them was Steve Jobs. And Newsweek, I think actually Time covered in 85, and then I think the Newsweek interview was in 1986, just after Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple. There was a long interview, which I found on the internet. I read it. I think you might still be able to find it. Very long interview in Newsweek, where he talks about Apple as an intrapreneurial company. It became a large company, but there was still the spirit of going back to the garage to invent new things within this organization. And that was kind of the big style launch of the term itself. And just a few years later, in 1992, it became part of the American Heritage Dictionary. And nowadays, of course, most large organizations have some kind of intrapreneurial initiative, business contests, trying to encourage bottom-up initiative from their staff, although it is often very tough to do in an existing organization. So this is the gentleman, Gifford Pinchot, who gave birth to the term intrapreneuring or intrapreneurship. And when he wrote his first book, he came out with the Intrapreneur's 10 Commandments. It might be a little bit difficult for you to read, but I'll introduce them. They're quite interesting. So imagine a person within a large organization wanting to do something fundamentally new. The first commandment is, come to work each day willing to be fired. Number 2 is, circumvent any orders aimed at stopping your dream. Number 3, do any job needed to make your project work, regardless of your job description. Number 4 is find people to help you. Then comes follow your intuition about the people you choose and work only with the best. Number 6, work underground as long as you can. Publicity triggers the corporate immune system. Yeah, that happens quite often in large and conservative organizations. Number 7 is kind of interesting. Never bet on a race unless you're running in it. So you have to be part of it to really run something entrepreneurial, he said back then. Number 8, remember it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. So go forward, try do it and ask for forgiveness afterwards if you need to. Number 9, be true to your goals, but be realistic about the ways to achieve them. And finally, honor your sponsors. They're pretty interesting, but as you can see, they're also rather radical. And as we grow older and have different experiences, we sometimes learn new things. And this also happened for Gifford. So many years later, 2011, that would be more than 40 years later than his first book, he added 6 more rules. He kind of moderated his earlier rules, actually. The first one, additional one, was ask for advice before asking for resources. Might make sense. Also, very interesting, number 2, express gratitude. Number 3, build your team. Intrapreneuring is not a solo activity. Even if you might have a great idea, you need people to work with you. Otherwise, you will get nowhere in an existing organization. Share credit widely. And number 5, keep the best interests of the company and its customers in mind, especially when you have to bend the rules or circumvent the bureaucracy. And then finally, he returns to his very first commandment, and he moderates it here. Don't ask to be fired. Even as you bend the rules and act without permission, use all the political skill you and your sponsors can muster to move the project forward without making waves. So you see how a lot of experience, 40 years of experience, can change perspective also. But when you try to do that, entrepreneurial initiatives within existing organizations, there are all sorts of barriers to implementation. And here on this slide is a humoristic version of them and a very serious one. If you go to the funny one first, it's a little cartoon, and it has, as you can see, an organizational chart, and at the top we have the chief idea killer. Then we have 3 vice presidents, VP of No, of Status Quo, and of Stay the Course. Then there are 3 directors, 1 director of onerous reporting, 1 of bureaucracy, 1 of rigidity, and 1 of the famous analysis paralysis. And there's only 1 vacant position in this organizational chart, and it is the manager of new growth ideas. This is not about Japanese corporations. This is about, I think, large American corporations. Put it in a serious way, it looks like the chart on the right side. There are different barriers to entrepreneurship. Some of them can be cultural. There's not a culture of encouraging bottom-up initiative, going beyond the normal boundaries, challenging status quo. The challenges or barriers can be strategic, especially the time horizons are different, the KPIs are different, it takes longer time to get to something. There can be other systemic or personal challenges, including your roles, the time you have available to do new things, and also functional, meaning quite often the silos that exist in the company make it difficult to try something entirely new. So far we talked only about intrapreneurship per se, intrapreneurship as such. Then after 2000, another important element was added, and that was the word social. So now I will add to my history, tell you how the word social intrapreneurship was born. And to tell you that, I have to go a little back in history, and there was the word entrepreneurship. And then late 1990s, the word social entrepreneurship started becoming popular. And actually around 2000s, it was quite a buzzword globally. So a good friend of mine, and also a friend of Shizenkan University, John Elkington from the think tank called Sustainability in the UK. Around 2007, he wrote a book about social entrepreneurs, and it was called The Power of Unreasonable People. It goes back to George Bernard Shaw's famous saying that the reasonable man adapts himself to his surroundings, whereas the unreasonable man fits surroundings to what he wants to do. And therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man, was what George Bernard Shaw said. So this book called Power of Unreasonable People was launched. It covered global social entrepreneurs, and there was a review of it in The Economist. And The Economist wrote, well, it's an excellent book, but what about all those people within existing organizations who want to do good for the world? Are you not thinking about those people? Are you only looking at those shiny social entrepreneurs out there? And when John Elkington read that review, he was actually quite moved by it. And he thought, well, they're right. There are many more people in terms of numbers, many more people within existing organizations who still want to do good for the world. And then he came across the term, the social intrapreneur, or he coined the term, the social intrapreneur. And the year later, his team at Sustainability, with some sponsorship from a couple of organizations, produced this report called The Social Intrapreneur, a field guide for corporate change makers. It's absolutely excellent report. I think you may still be able to find it on the internet, but this would be the first publication, I think, about social entrepreneurship. And one of the authors of this report was a woman called Maggie Dupree, a good friend of mine, who then quit Sustainability. And in 2012, with a couple of friends, she established a network called the League of Intrapreneurs. This is kind of the leading global network on social entrepreneurship. They have a big, hairy, audacious goal of empowering 1 million social entrepreneurs by 2030. So this is the way the word social was added to the idea of entrepreneurship. And after some years of activities, trying out different things, Maggie and her partners in the League of Intrapreneurs published a beautiful little book called The Intrapreneur's Guide to Pathfinding, which is now also available in Japanese. It is a very nice guide to social entrepreneurship. And in this book, they define the term social entrepreneurship in the following way: an autonomous process through which individuals or groups of individuals seek to identify and exploit entrepreneurial opportunities that address societal challenges from within established organizations. So you have some key elements here. It has to be an autonomous process. It can be individuals or groups, and within an established organization, they first identify and then they exploit entrepreneurial opportunities that address societal or environmental challenges. And the interesting thing is, it's not only within corporations. You definitely also need government entrepreneurs. Let's say in Japan, for example, we have the Japan International Collaboration Agency called JICA. And they are very large and very bureaucratic organizations. So they are also in need of what you could call government entrepreneurs. And also large and rather old non-profit organizations may also be in need of social entrepreneurs. But why is it that social entrepreneurship is so essential today? Why is it that we're teaching it at Shizenkan University? And why is it that I think it's really, really a promising approach for large organizations? This also is from the League of Intrapreneurs, this chart, where you kind of see the sweet spot in the middle for social entrepreneurship. First of all, the world is facing serious social, environmental challenges, sustainability challenges. That's here, systems change is needed. Second, corporations must innovate continuously and create value also from these challenges. And third, there's a new generation of talent out there. The millennials, Gen Z, and even younger generations are not only digital natives, they are also sustainability natives. They really want to work with companies that have a great purpose and that create goods that address some of the world's big sustainability challenges. So where these three main kind of characteristics of our time overlap, there is right now a sweet spot for social entrepreneurship. Stanford Social Innovation Review, a very interesting magazine in 2018, I think it was, wrote a very interesting article called Cultivating the Social Entrepreneur, where they also touched in a very nice way on the kind of positioning of the social entrepreneur within organizations. So let me explain this rather confusing slide here. What I have on the left, I'm sorry, it's kind of vertically placed here, are societal innovation drivers like the Paris Agreement for climate change, like the SDGs, new policy frameworks, ESG investment. What they do is they demand a new form of innovation from corporations. You have to innovate for decarbonization, for the circular economy. You have to innovate around the SDGs. You have to meet ESG demands. A new form of innovation is needed, and it is multifaceted. It cuts across many corporate functions: product, processes, marketing, management, partnerships, etc. So who is going to be the executors of this new form of innovation? Are you going to throw it at KPMG or PwC or Accenture every single time? It's not very effective. So we need a new kind of talent inside existing corporations. And that's what, as Stanford Social Innovation Review says here, in the zone where business meets sustainable development, there is a new kind of hero, the social entrepreneur. A social entrepreneur is an entrepreneurial employee who develops a profitable new product, service, or business model that creates value for society and her company. Which is, of course, very American to start talking about heroes, but maybe there's something true in it, because heroes often have to overcome a lot of hardship before they get their hero done. And that is very often also the case for the social entrepreneur. So now we're kind of coming to the latter half or the final part of my presentation. And I would like to kind of look a little bit at what kind of people are these social entrepreneurs. And again, it's the League of Intrapreneurs. They spent a lot of time thinking about this. They are raising 6 key characteristics of social entrepreneurs. First of all, Social entrepreneurs are silo busters. That means they break through the vertical silos that you find in large existing organizations. They like collaborating across traditional company boundaries. They are also opportunity spotters. They're good at finding innovation potential where others typically see a risk or a challenge. And if you want to kind of turn social challenges into a business opportunity, you really have to be good at identifying these new opportunities. But to make them come alive, you also have to be a systems thinker. You have to see the interconnections between business value and societal pressures, and also see how this might lead to new customer benefits as well. Then 3 more characteristics of the social entrepreneur. They are, or generally have to be, storytellers, because they are telling a new story that is not necessarily along the lines of the dominant story inside the company. They have to be compelling storytellers, and with those stories, they bring others on board with their vision for shared value. They bring on what we call co-travelers in the social entrepreneurship word, a word I actually really like. You find co-travelers because this is a journey, especially social entrepreneurship, which might take longer than other forms of innovation. Most often, the social entrepreneurs are also dreamers. They dream and they believe that business can be a force for good in the world. But, and this is the caveat here that just being a dreamer is not enough. They must also be doers. They must have some track record of getting stuff done, because otherwise, within an existing organization, they will never get the resources that they need, the time, the staff to actually build a team and continue. So I don't know where you are in your own work situation, how you would score yourself against these 6 characteristics. And I think most of us don't have them all, but it's important for social entrepreneurs, and maybe also entrepreneurs, to have many of these characteristics. Very good. And here I'll take a little breather because I have another video which I want to show you, which is about social entrepreneurship. So let me just find it on my PowerPoint. We had some connectivity issues for those who joined later on. So the next video is about social entrepreneurship. And before I start it, let me tell you just a little bit about the gentleman who appears quite a lot in the video and who comes in the beginning here. It's a gentleman called Gib Bullock from the United Kingdom. And he started an initiative within Accenture, which he called a not-for-loss initiative. You know, not-for-profit, non-profit, right? That's a not-for-profit initiative. He started something he called a not-for-loss initiative, saying that, well, our services are so bloody expensive that churches, non-profits, they can never get consulting services. Can we not create an initiative where we do not lose money, but where we provide our services at cost to such non-profit organizations? So he called it a not-for-loss business arm, and it still exists. Many years later, it's called the Accenture Development Partnerships. So Gib Bullock kicks off, and then there are some other entrepreneurs who tell the story of social entrepreneurship.
Someone who is a change maker, a risk taker, somewhat creative, and certainly entrepreneurial. All the entrepreneurial attributes, but within the context of a large, pre-scaled ecosystem like a corporate.
These are people who are part of the company, but can see beyond the way that the company currently operates, the way it currently creates value, can see new connections, new areas of opportunity and possibility.
For me, intrapreneurship is really about scale and impact and the ability to make a big difference quite quickly.
A social entrepreneur is, in my experience and view, a graceful warrior. Someone that is willing to go after the biggest opportunities and problem solve them with a level of tenacity that is unfounded anywhere else, but at the same time be graceful enough and astute enough to bring others along with you.
What characterizes them, perhaps most fundamentally, is that ability to connect with people both inside and outside the company or organization from the top to the very bottom.
It's a behaviour, it's a mindset, rather than a set of criteria. In my experience, it's something like a calling to a certain extent. And I don't mean that in a religious sense, I mean that in an idea that just won't go away, that won't let you forget about it when you go to bed at night. You're waking up about it, you care about it so deeply, and you feel so strongly about the opportunity that you just have to do something about it.
Governments are largely failing us. Investors and consumers are not really supporting business to drive social and environmental change in the way that these agendas need to be driven. So more and more of this will fall upon business.
Most of the world's greatest problems will not be solved by one sector or one discipline. They will require a group of people coming together and sharing ideas and coming up with a really holistic, integrated solution.
And let's face it, 50 plus of the largest 100 economies in the world are businesses. And if we can get small change in these huge super tankers, if I use that analogy, just 1 degree of change in a massive organisation can lead to massive impact downstream.
Systemic issues can't be solved alone. We have to work together. We need you.
Right. I hope that worked okay for you. A graceful warrior is kind of a very nice term, I think, for describing what social entrepreneurs are like. So in the end, I wanted to introduce some resources and also a little bit about what we do at Shizenkan in our entrepreneurship course. I already introduced this book, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Pathfinding. It's a very, very entertaining, very concrete book about social entrepreneurship with a lot of good tips along the way. The one in the middle is by Gib Bullock, the gentleman who created the Accenture Development Partnerships. A very fascinating book that describes his own journey of social entrepreneurship. Then there's another one called Social Entrepreneurship, Entrepreneurs and All That Jazz, comparing social entrepreneurship to like the way you kind of go along and co-create music in jazz. And of course, if you're interested in learning more, the best online resource right now is the website of the League of Intrapreneurs. They also have some very interesting global entrepreneur weeks every autumn. So do take a look if you're interested at the League of Intrapreneurs. And Shizenkan is working closely together with this league in our social entrepreneurship course. And in the course, we use a tool that the league developed called the Intrapreneur Compass. And maybe we have a chance later on when one of the students from the course joins us. But this is a tool that kind of charts the journey, helps you chart your journey from the center, looking at your higher order question. What is it that you're questioning in the world or questioning in your organization? What is the motivation behind this? Why are you moving out of your comfort zone into at least your stretch zone? So you start here digging deep. And too often we don't dig deep enough. But to identify your quest, you need to dig that deep. Then from that, you go to what's called my world-changing idea. What is that thing with which you hope to change the world, even a little bit? If that relates strongly to your motivation, and if you can keep your fire going, then you're already on a good path. But then you need to build a story around your world-changing idea. With that story, you need to engage co-travelers. You need to analyze who's with you, who are just the kind of watchers, and who are the gatekeepers, etc. Then you need to also estimate the travel conditions in your company or maybe in society. When is the right time to move? So the upper orange areas here are shaping my quest, preparing to move into the unknown. The bottom half here is journeying into that unknown area. It starts by getting on the move, basically with research, testing, and prototyping. And then there is a huge or very high wall here actually between that field and feeding my project, which means how do I get permission, people, time, and money to kind of really make the project take off. And then one of the very kind of nice elements about this tool is what they call the resilience plan. What is my hydration plan? And it is meant on a mental and also physical level, of course. So think before you jump into the unknown, think about what kind of hydration plan might help you keep going in the wilderness. Finally, define your own indicators, both of progress and success. Progress are like KPIs, and the ultimate impact measurements are more like impact indicators. How would you measure your progress in terms of ultimate success, ultimate impact also? So this is a tool that we use in all the Shizenkan courses. And there's really a lot of discovery, I think, in the process of using the Intrapreneurs compass. I think we have one of the students from this course, from this year, who just completed the course, as Professor Yoshikawa said, but also some other testimonials from participating students. And if you're interested, of course, I know that Yoshikawa-san will be happy to tell more about Shizenkan University after this open class finishes. And with that, I will hand over again to Yoshikawa-san, and maybe I hope that we can first have a Q&A and also involve the participant of the course from this year. But finally, if you do not feel that you are presently job crafting, more than 50%, I'd say, then perhaps now is a good time to reconsider your work situation. Life is too short to stay, unless, of course, you need the job security, the money, which we all need, but at least you have the freedom to think about other ways or other places of working too. Thank you so much for being here, and I will hand back over to Yoshikawa-san again.